In the beginning, there was nothing. There was no sound, no words, no live stream. And then the Comics Pals appeared. We were born amongst a sea of other podcasts that all wanted to talk about comics. And yet, this one persisted. This podcast persisted and managed to carry on and become as big as it is today, which is what has necessitated a crisis. A crisis so large that it required Cale,
What's up, hot dogs?
Marco,
Earth 7 Marco standing by.
Tyler,
Earth 42069 Tyler here for service.
and Sean to come here for what could be the biggest event in Pal's history. Pals will live, pals will die, and nothing will ever be the same.
Except this
We are
book club.
talking about Crisis of Infinite Pals. Well, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
We've already had Crisis on Infinite Pals.
Yeah. This is the big one. This is the one that started it all. And we are very excited to talk about it today. You guys have been very, very excited for this to happen. The Discord has been popping off with Crisis on Infinite Earth conversation and thoughts for the last week. I mean, the last weeks, really.
Yeah, more. Yeah.
And so thank you all for that. Thank you to everybody that is with us, whether you are live or in the future. I know how important Crisis on Infinite Earths is to so many people. And the hope on our part is that we can do it some justice. So you guys let us know what you think about this conversation as it goes on. And also, I want to let you know that at the end of this, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear all your thoughts about Crisis, your thoughts on our conversation, what we get right and wrong. The comment section is there for that. So make sure that you guys sound off. And yeah, let's jump right in. So, Crisis on Infinite Earths is a 12-issue miniseries event, if you will. That was the criteria for the book club. Written by Marv Wolfman, with art and co-plotting by George Perez, inks by Dick Giordano, Jerry Ordway, and Mike DiCarlo, letters by John Costanza, colors by Anthony Tollin, Tim Ziuko, and Carl Gafford, and edited by Marv Wolfman himself. If that is weird to you, then I will explain why later.
Okay, good.
Of course, there are a lot of things. I mean, I have never read this before. I've been pretty open about that, and there are a lot of things that were new to me about this. Not just the story itself, but the story behind the story. And so my hope is that I can translate those things for you guys so that you can learn some new things. I mean, we've got people here who were reading this thing when it was coming out between 85 April of 85 and March of 86. So if I can tell you something you don't know, I will be pretty happy.
Done the job.
Yeah.
That's the goal. I also wanted to say that this book was voted on by the patrons. You guys wanted this overwhelmingly. I asked you to let me know if you voted for this book specifically, and a few of you did. So I want to shout out Atomic Hound, Izzy Spears, Robert Kashabak, and Rami Darwish, who all voted for Crisis on Infinite Earths. And thank you to everybody who voted for anything. That's fantastic. We had more engagement on this than any other book club we've ever done. So appreciate it. Now, let's get into it. It all started with a boy's dream of seeing all of DC's characters together in one big adventure fighting one big evil. That big evil being a character that he would call the Librarian. Marv Wolfman, yep, that's just one. That's just one of the many things.
I
Marv
hate
Wolfman, I know, right? I kind of wish he was still that. But then again, it's like the anti-librarian. That's
I kind of like it.
It's just an iPad kid.
The streamer, yeah. What would the anti-librarian be?
It's us.
Marv Wolfman would grow up and go on to pursue a career in comics, never quite forgetting the dream he had had as a boy. He pitched the idea to DC as a limited series, which he got from watching the Prisoner TV show, a limited series itself, but was told the idea wouldn't work because of the nature of the industry at the time. Readers were suspicious of books with low numbering because they were unproven and typically took about 6 issues to decide to give a book a chance, which is a wild difference between the industry now and then.
Whoa.
We are
Tell it to Marvel.
so far from God's green earth.
That's insane. That sounds like manga.
Oh man, I love the history of comics. Marv would put the dream at the back of his mind again, admitting that the market realities meant it needed to remain just that. In 1980, Marv would team up with popular artist George Perez for their now legendary Teen Titans run, New Teen Titans run. In 81, while Marv was editor for the Green Lantern title, he received mail from a fan who'd asked about a continuity problem involving a character not recognizing another, even though they'd interacted in an issue 3 years prior. Wolfman, now a believer that DC's sales slump was due in part to their confusing and contradictory timeline, specifically blamed the story The Flash of Two Worlds from Flash 123 in 1961, as was the first comic to allude to a multiverse within DC, as it had Barry Allen teaming up with Jay Garrick. He felt that DC needed to be simplified and again returned to his dream of an all-encompassing limited series that could resolve the continuity problems by getting rid of the multiverse. By this time, the direct market was in full swing, meaning that for the first time, these publishers could target their audiences directly, opening up infinite worlds of possibilities. Now, Marv's dream could become a reality. He fought to show DC's brass the necessity of this idea, and it was greenlit, initially titled History of the DC Universe. While Marvel would strike first with their big crossover event Secret Wars in 1984, DC announced History of the DC Universe at a New York comic convention in 1981. But it wouldn't see release until 85, as it took them that long to get a handle on DC's complicated continuity. They literally hired a guy to read every DC comic, and it took him 2 years to read them.
Yo, that's cool. Damn, what a good job.
We do it for free.
There it is.
Nah, I would charge for that. I would charge for that.
DC had no artist in place to draw the book, and Marv would often talk about his plans while working with Perez on Titans. Perez, excited by what he had heard, asked if he could draw the series, and Marv immediately responded with a yes, as that is exactly what he was hoping would happen.
Mark said, "Oh hell yeah!"
One of the first things Perez did upon joining the project was to suggest a name change based on a book called Crisis on Earth 2. Thus, the Crisis on Infinite Earths was born.
Huh.
Despite it being greenlit and having the backing of Dick Giordano, Paul Levitz, and Jeanette Kahn, who were all bigwigs at the company at the time, many at DC were not fond of this idea, and there wasn't much confidence that the book would sell. It received little to no promotion, and other editors wanted no part of it, forcing Wolfman to have to edit the book himself. Of course, here we are, some 40 years later, and it stands as one of the most successful projects that DC has ever done. And it completely changed the landscape of not only DC Comics and continuity going forward, but of comics in general. It launched the blockbuster event. It's not the first. It's not Secret Wars, but certainly it took the idea that you could do these big events in continuity and do something meaningful with the characters within them. Real story, real storytelling.
Hmm.
And that's something we still see to this day. So I don't think, and I don't come into this questioning the legacy of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Did it accomplish the goal of simplifying DC's continuity? Yeah, absolutely. Our goal, my goal today, is to answer the question of, is this book still good? Is it still worth reading? Because what it did for DC Comics certainly doesn't resonate today. Not in the sense that the continuity has stuck. They've done crises since then and reboots since then. So that is out the window. But whether or not a person should still read this, that I think is what I want to talk about today. I have never read this prior to now. Tyler and Cale, I know you both have, right?
Multiple
Absolutely.
times, yeah.
Yep.
And Marco, you're new to it.
Yes, sir. First time.
I love it. That's a beautiful setup
Yeah.
for this conversation.
Mm.
Cale, I would love to hear from you first because this is a book that's deeply connected to you, and you talked highly of it during our top 5 DC events. So why don't you kick us off by telling us how you came across this and why it's so important to you?
So, geez, I think probably the first time I read this was early in my comic reading career. I just found DC after just devouring everything that I was interested in at Marvel at the time, which would have been Spider-Man. And this was coming off of Batman Hush, which had just been released in trade, the beginning of Jeff Johns' Teen Titans, and then my school library had gotten me into Peter David's Young Justice. And so from all that, I just blew up and expanded everything, all knowledge I had of DC. Well, Batman's DC, I live in DC. Great. And so I constantly was on hyperborea.net, which is an online encyclopedia for the Flash that I believe still is open. And it rules.
Do you know why it's called Hyperborea?
Nope. I
I
think it has
thought it was a Conan message board.
something to do with the Flash, but I couldn't exactly tell you what these days anyway. So just absolutely digging through anything I could get my hands on, working my way backward through history. I came across the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I read it for the first time on a summer church camp bus in Houston in 100-degree heat, 100% humidity with no air conditioning. And I both poured over that thing and I poured over that thing. Just dripping sweat while the anti-monitor's monologuing. And I could not get enough of it because it was everything. Everything was in this, and I was hungry for it.
Were you already a Flash fan at this point too?
I think it was starting. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Yeah.
My best friend growing up at the time and I sort of we would sort of pair our favorite characters together, and so he would be the Flash and I would be Green Lantern, and we would be the Brave and the Bold.
Nice.
So just anything that sort of revolved around that was what we were interested in. And so yes.
So for me, this book came about in high school. I was in a comic book club, and I was traditionally a Marvel head at that point, big into Marvel. I think Final Crisis might have been happening or just ending right around this time. So I was familiar with the crises as a concept. I had already read Infinite, I had already read Identity. Final Crisis was happening, so I was into it. But the head of my comic book club and my friend James kind of told me to read this book from what I remember. Um, and I've read it since. I read it for my previous podcast and everything like that. And in my head, it's always existed as kind of almost the Silmarillion of the DC universe in a way. It feels like a textbook that you should read to understand what this universe can be. There are some big character moments in it, but they're specific to specific characters. If you want a Batman story, this isn't for you. This is more of a kind of getting your feet wet onto what the potential of DC Comics was. And reading this and it's dense. This is a dense one, guys. Um, I was halfway through this. I'm like, is this done? Like, what? Oh no, we haven't even gotten there yet. Um, and it's still, I think it's still good, but it is a, I don't want to say a slog to read, but it is a job to read. Um, but I enjoy it even to this day. I mean, it really helps. The art's really good. But that's kind of where I came in through it. It came to me as a book I must read if I wanted to like DC Comics, or at least invest myself into that world. So I kind of just dove right in.
Did you enjoy it at the time when you read it?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. That's going back a while, so I don't really remember. But I'm pretty sure I did because otherwise I wouldn't have read it again. Um, but I just remember it being like I was used to the more action blockbuster movie that was Infinite Crisis, and not that this isn't,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there's a lot of reading in it. I read funny books, I read comic books. I don't expect a lot of words, but especially, I'm reading Marvel Bendis at the time, so it is very different than what I was reading at the time when I first read this. So it was a bit of a shock to the system, but I remember at least enjoying it enough to be like, yes, I understand why people hold this in such a regard.
I think our perspective, the four of us, is an interesting one because no matter when it is that we all read this, whether it's like Marco and I having just done it or you guys having read it, decades ago, none of us were even alive when it was coming out. So we're not connected to the way that DC was at that time from the perspective of someone who's there. We have people in our audience who have that experience, but we do not. And so for me, this is very much an exploration. It's almost like archaeology. It's almost like, looking back at a different time, a completely different circumstance, and observing it historically. Um, and that's really what this was for me. It was a window into a version of DC that doesn't exist anymore and that I have very, very little familiarity with. Because when people advise you on what books from DC you should read, I would say I can't think of anything that I have been advised to read from DC that isn't like I don't remember the exact time, the exact year, but I know that things like The Dark Knight Returns came out around this time frame. I can't think of anything I've ever been advised to read that's prior to this or prior to that specific era.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big reason for that, I think, is, and you can feel it, or at least I could feel it reading this, is that it feels like a comic that, and this era feels like an era of comics that is representative of a different time. It doesn't feel like a modern comic, at least not to me. That's a quality that I enjoyed and didn't. It's interesting because there was no blueprint yet for what an event book should be. At the time, as I said earlier, Secret Wars beat this by a year. in terms of actually releasing. But this was planned and plotted before Secret Wars was. There were people who thought that this was actually a ripoff. There were people who read Secret Wars first and thought that this was aping that. Because I guess, they have sort of similar ish ideas in very broad strokes of removing the heroes from their trappings to put them in different environments that, you know, center two characters who are not really that big a part of the DC universe, that being Monitor and Anti-Monitor, who are playing like a grander game that the heroes just fall into. So there were accusations of plagiarism. That's how new these concepts were. And I feel like Marv Wolfman is making it up as he goes along in terms of developing the blueprint for this kind of thing. But it's so important to keep in mind as you talk about and think about Crisis on Infinite Earths, especially against Secret Wars, is that they were created for completely different reasons. Secret Wars was created to be essentially a toy line tie-in. And Mattel had a lot of hand in crafting that. Jim Shooter wanted to write it. He felt like he was the only person who could write it. But it wasn't made to be a deep story or do anything to change or alter the Marvel Universe in any way. They created the black costume to make a new costume to sell. Crisis on Infinite Earths had a job to do that had nothing to do with sales.
A massive industry shift.
Yeah. It had the responsibility of simplifying a continuity that was crazy.
Wouldn't you say then, in a way, it had to do with sales? Because their continuity was so complicated at the time that it was hard for people to get into it, therefore limiting sales in like a kind of a roundabout way.
I mean, I'm just saying that like Secret Wars was created as a strictly commercial
Sure.
property that had no story basis whatsoever, whereas Crisis did. And it certainly went on to sell tremendously, but I think Secret Wars is probably a more bankable property on the outset just because of literally why they did it. But I think for me, speaking personally, I enjoy Secret Wars more. Like as a story. I think it not well, as a reading experience, I enjoyed it more. This felt like work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I compare it to the Silmarillion, because that's work as well for like Tolkien fans out there. There's a lot of pieces that they didn't really like when Anthro shows up early on in the book. Like, who is that? I had to Google that guy. The guy I was like, oh, it's Commandi. It's not. It's Dia Commandi. So there is a lot of work that goes into this, and this is like I'm like a comic vine Wikipedia rabbit hole every time a new character shows up.
Well, yeah, we were talking about how, there's nothing like it anymore, and we're so far past it. This is almost Shakespeare.
That's a good comparison, actually. It, I think it has the work of communicating the ideas. I think is hard enough, but to be able to do so in the art style that it communicates in, like I feel like there's a number of pages almost consistently that have multiple panels, and so the work I think comes from having 6 or more panels on a page and having to read the text throughout all of that, and having what would be normal speech bubbles in each of those. You have 2 to 3 in each one, but when you multiply that across the actual art, the art front, and how much you have to communicate on an art front as well, that I think that combination is what's just like, okay, I'm paying attention to all of these things, plus all these characters in the background, plus the relationships. You're just juggling a lot of things all the time. So I think it reads for me well when you can let yourself sink into the characters and the moments, But if you get pulled out, and I got pulled out a lot of times throughout the read, it's like I have to work my way back into just getting into the zone of, okay, I right, this person is having an emotional reaction. This person is uh, telling me something or explaining something of importance that I have to like really hone in on because it'll be important later, or it'll be important to why certain things are going on. I think what it ends up being is having to really pay attention to what you can get by on the art, but here you can't always. It doesn't flow on art alone because of the necessity of having to tell you what's happening as well.
I think, yeah, and I think it's almost a tough book to it's almost a tough book to talk about because as dense as it is, and I do think that it is very, very dense. As dense as it is, it's not dense because it's not dense because there's so much thematic weight. It's just dense because there's a lot of stuff going
Yeah.
and there's a lot of characters in it. Marv Wolfman wasn't playing around when he said he wanted to use everybody. There are well over 100 characters in this.
I wonder if that has to do with the fact that he edited his own work. Like you mentioned that, Sean, and that blew my mind. I'm like, how does that even work? How do you edit your own book? That's called a second draft. Like, um, because there's a lot of points where like if this book was made today, it could be in 6 issues. There's a lot of it that kind of brings you along, like the whole part where it becomes like the nether world that feels like we're kind of on a little side like a side shortcut in a way. And they have to deal with that and Harbinger losing her powers and all of that. Um, and that I don't know how many issues that takes to do that, but it feels like there's a lot of like tangents that go outside of it to explain a lot more and to bring more characters in, or at least show that the characters are here to then explain that like, all right, we're going to bring all these worlds together in a way.
Well, I think to that there's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of reiterating and reminding people of what's going on in the moment, where I feel like that's because you have to show the multitude of characters having that reaction. It's like the reaction shots in an anime or something. Everybody, it pans over to somebody having some kind of adverse reaction. The moment where in issue, let's say like 11, when the Earths go away, right? Everybody has to have a moment of, oh, that's right, this person was on this Earth, but then is no longer and no longer has these memories. And they did that over the course of 6-7 pages for individual characters. When I think now there's a lot of cutting of fat, and not that it's not good story or that you don't want to see these characters' reaction, but for the sake of brevity, I think nowadays you would probably cut those things.
Atomic Hound with the 9.99 super chat. Thank you, Hound. He says, I will not argue that Crisis is the greatest story ever in DC, but it is unapologetically my favorite, just due to scope and consequences. Loving these personal experiences with it. Thank you so much, Hound. And so that is, I think, where I came into this. Was, man, there's so much hype around this. There is so much, prestige and glory to this. People whose opinions I very much respect swear by this. I went out and made sure I got a nice, snazzy hardcover for this because I just assumed this is golden. There's no missing on this.
Let me get the 360 on that one, Sean, for the YouTube fans out there. Is it the full Alex Ross art across the whole side?
Yeah.
Oh,
You know it, baby.
That's that good Alex Ross art too.
Oh, God.
He's having trouble holding it. That's how big this is.
I've seen that one on sale at the near Comic
Yeah.
Con, the Alex
I
Ross
might,
section.
yeah, dude, I might be doing a new one because I just ruined mine on the trip here.
Nice.
Oh, that's good. That's a nice jacket there. Mine got I put it in a bag with a sunscreen. And anytime you put something in a bag with sunscreen, that never works out. So I'm due for a new copy.
Yeah, so I was really anticipating like loving this. And what I found is a story that I really had a lot of trouble with, actually. I
Hmm.
had a lot of trouble finding my way into this because this story doesn't center around characters that I care about largely. And because I don't feel like there was really an emotional anchor, you have to specifically, in my opinion, care about this version of the DC universe. And I don't have
Mm.
a connection to it. So it was very tough. Like, there are so many characters in here. And I was really trying to think about, like, okay, well, as I'm working on the narrative of this, what characters can we talk about? And I mean, I have a list, but I feel like you can say a couple of things about people, but once you get past that, it's like, well, this guy does this, says this, and that's it.
Yep.
That's really all his involvement is. Because there's so many characters, and I think to Marv's credit, he really does try to give as many people as he can a moment of something. That was impressive. But because everybody has to get a moment of something, I don't really feel like too many people get big moments that feel like substantial arcs across the 12 issues.
I feel like the most people that get big moments are the people that were pretty much made for this event. I'm thinking Harbinger. I'm thinking Monitor. Even Alexander Luthor with the Jerry curls um, also has some moments in this. But it's specific to those characters who I think Harbinger might have showed up a little bit pre-Crisis and some like material that just like predates Crisis. Um, but again, like in terms of importance, they're non-existent to the major picture. Supergirl gets a good moment, Flash gets a good moment, but the main crux of the story is like Psycho Pirate. Who was he before this besides like a D-rate villain? Um, so there, in some ways, I respect that. I like how it is creating new characters for this event, but also I'm kind of with you, Sean, where it's like, where do I put my investment in what characters? Like, do I have to create an investment for these characters? I think I would have preferred it if, like with Earth 2, Superboy, I bring in that investment. So I feel that when that happens. Here, it's a little tricky knowing where I put my emotional value.
I think too, like my read this time, not living in that world anymore and not being so hungry for just anything and any sort of history, I think was really, and also like I finished this an hour ago. Um, man, I've been busy. um, but like it getting through each and every one, I did feel the weight, maybe for the first time in my history of reading this, of okay, I know this guy has a winged helmet and he's about to die and it's fine, let's go.
It it wants you to it wants you to linger a lot, and I was also thinking of it from the perspective of, um, back when people had the attention spans for these kinds of things, in like you can that much more invest yourself or delve into the their narrative and moments, because I think, uh, because we don't have that POV character, you have to care about this moment of DC. You have to care about the
Yeah.
characters that you do get and that you might be a fan of, but then you also have to be a fan of DC as a whole. Like, oh my God, these characters are coming in. These guys are coming in. Like, I think it also includes, from that intro piece that you mentioned, Sean, where comics fans were skeptical of books that didn't have high numbers. That must have meant that these people were invested into the narrative. They could list off, oh shit, this person's here on this page, and oh my God, where we don't have that kind of connection anymore because of who is prominent nowadays.
Well, and that's something I've been sort of looking for a place to point out is, if you remember back when we were talking about the big the DC implosion. Do you remember some of those crazy titles that were listed off, that DC was publishing and wanted to publish, that were characters that wouldn't have seen the light of day today. But like those characters had books and full arcs, and like I think Wolfman here is he's working so hard to make sure everybody gets a moment, because everybody has a character that they care about here. And you know every pocket of every aspect of the DC universe has to get a little shine, very specifically, so that this matters, and that when it comes together, it feels whole, and it feels like it matters.
And not only that, I think in a post kind of Crisis on Infinite Earths world, our world, we're probably a little spoiled. Like, imagine if Captain Marvel fights Supergirl in a couple panels. That must have been mind blowing for somebody where like those characters probably never interacted before. That's Superman fighting Captain America in the 90s. It's huge, but we're just so used to like the effects of Crisis on Infinite Earths, this book that we just read, existing in the way we've read DC Comics for our entirety, that
Yeah.
we probably take it a little bit for granted.
Yeah, there's no novelty there. Yeah, that's fair.
No, yeah.
Well, and I even read this before Infinite Crisis. So, even like the hype going into Infinite Crisis was like, "Oh, I know what all of this is echoing. This is going to be fucking nuts." And I was right. But yeah, there have been 17 since then. And
MP with the $20 super chat. He says, I think the reasoning for Crisis on Infinite Earths is fundamentally wrong. You don't need to destroy the old canon to create a new one. Batman Year One / Burns Superman / Perez's Wonder Woman don't need Crisis on Infinite Earths to exist. You can reboot by just starting a new universe. Thanks, MP. And that's a fascinating, thing to think about, and certainly one of the questions that I wanted to ask here during this conversation, because Marv Wolfman felt that the multiverse itself was a problem that needed to be solved, and so they couldn't also just say, all right, everybody that cares about continuity, screw all of you. We're rebooting from one and saying it's a wrap for all that stuff you remember. Which is sort of kind of what the New 52 did. And we see how upset that made a lot of people who were longtime DC fans. Because
if
your favorite character wasn't Batman or Green Lantern, they got rebooted.
Yeah.
That wasn't exactly the case with Crisis, but it mostly was, I guess. The multiverse was gone. And I think that I personally, I think that Crisis didn't have to exist to do what you're saying, but I think that I understand why, from the perspective of somebody at that time, this would have felt like the way to solve the problem.
And not only that, MP directly to his comment, I think this needed to happen to be able to realize what you're saying. Like, I think kind of doing the Crisis and merging all these tangent universes together into a single one then created its own problems, which without doing that, you can't really realize that, like, oh, I can make, absolute comics, if, when you're listening to this, I don't know when it is, or something like that, because this just seems so straightforward, but it leads to other issues that I think it's just like you learn from doing anything really.
But I also think this was a statement, you know. Um, this wasn't just a reboot for the things that were coming after, like like we've said, and very generally, this was like continuity property cleanup.
Mhm.
This has put everything on the table for to get it all in one place.
Yeah, and I think that starting fresh would have absolutely been cleaner, but I also think it's
Mm.
more alienating. Like that, because like Tyler said, it created problems of its own, which you wouldn't have had if they literally just said, okay, we're closing out that prior era with not with a big story, just we're just saying it's over and starting with new number ones and calling it a day. I think that would have upset a lot of people even more than they probably were in the aftermath of this. Because I know there were a lot of people who were upset about, like, for example, Supergirl's death. That was a major sticking point. And I really did want to talk about that because, you know, at this time in just human history, death in comics wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't something that you did when you wanted to pop sales on a book. It just didn't really happen as much. And if it did happen, you generally assumed, all right, well, this character's cooked. Like, I'm not going to see them again. I don't know where they're going to be. And so, Supergirl being killed was a big deal. But here's a little bit of factual history.
Hit me.
Supergirl wasn't selling.
Mm.
The character's book wasn't selling. People were not as into her anymore. And on an editorial level, she presented a problem because you could never say that Superman was the last son of Krypton as long as Supergirl existed.
Hmm.
And she wasn't the only other Kryptonian person. You had a dog, there were all these different Kryptonians that were around that negated the concept of Superman being the last son of this world, which feels core to the character. We see that same problem today.
Yeah, that was almost more ridiculous, I think, back then. And I may be corrected by the old heads in the chat, but it was mostly animals. You had a super horse, you had a super dog, you had a super cat, you had all kinds of stuff. And I think most of them lived in Supergirl's title.
I understand the decision completely. But people at the time didn't like it. Marv Wolfman himself spoke about the reaction, and this is what he said, quote, people were fighting for characters they hadn't read, bought, or cared about in years, but suddenly they were buying DC Comics because they didn't know what to expect. And this
Mm.
is what he said,
Mm.
in the aftermath of this criticism about, the deaths of Supergirl and Barry Allen Flash specifically. There were all these upset people, but his argument is, hey, you care more now that these characters are dead than you did when they were alive. The difference is that you can't read their books, but you are curious about the other ones because you don't know where we're going to go next. And that was powerful. The DC universe prior to Crisis seems like, and again, I don't know everything, but just based on what I know, it seems like it was a pretty predictable place, a safe place, a safe world or worlds. And it was no longer that in the Crisis. And that's one of the things I think the book really gets right is that it does have stakes. Granted, none of this shit matters anymore today. But when you read these books, it's like hopefully just in my reading, it feels like things matter. And it did feel like that. I think Marv Wolfman and Perez's biggest achievement, well, Perez, where we haven't even gotten into him, his biggest achievement is every single page of this. But
Every single panel.
from a story standpoint, I think their biggest achievement is making the stakes feel real and present and making it feel like things changed from the beginning of this to the end of it.
Yeah.
And to their credit, I mean, like outside of Uncle Ben, the Barry Allen thing stuck, for a good long while.
Yeah.
I don't know how long Supergirl stuck for. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that long.
It wasn't that long.
But like the Barry Allen thing was like comic book history, like even like when I started reading comics, Barry wasn't back yet. Um, it was Wally. That was the one that was the Flash that was my Flash growing up. So the stakes lasted even through other crises. So
Yeah.
give him credit for that at least.
I also really enjoyed the setup of the Monitor and Anti-Monitor. It was transparent. It was pretty clear who the Anti-Monitor or who the enemy would be, but I could certainly imagine how in 1985 the reveal of the Anti-Monitor would have been pretty sick. And from a design standpoint, I think that he looks incredible, the Anti-Monitor.
It's
One of
cool.
my favorite villain designs.
The amount of times I look at the Anti-Monitor McFarlane action figure in stores, I'm like, I don't want you. It's so cool looking. The teeth, it almost looks like whale bristles in a way.
Yeah. I really love the pre-armor version. Like I always forget about that version, even though there's a massive splash page of it and the horror of it. But I really took the time this time to burn that into my memory because I think it's so cool.
Despite that, I really wish this book wasn't such a slow burn. We
Yeah.
spend a lot of time like assembling the troops, but the troops is like 50, 11 people. Like it's just so many people. And it's you got to find out what their name is, you got to find out what their core weakness and strength is, you got to find out like everything about them, and it just takes up so much time.
I think there are also characters that suffer from just being there. Pariah and his long-winded, monologues and the need for him to witness everything. Like he had his thing, right? He started all this. Cool. I don't need to see him again. Like I don't need, because he's not our POV character either. I don't need him to bear witness to all this stuff because I am going through that. Maybe that's the point. I'm going through that alongside you, but man, I don't need you talking through all of that. Same with Psycho Pirate. I remember when we were doing Dark Crisis. DC, was it DC Comics presents Dark Crisis on Infinite whatever's, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember you guys were really excited when Psycho Pirate came in, and it felt like that had gravity to it. Here, I don't get it. Like that the severity of who he is it's not there. It doesn't feel warranted. I don't understand even his need in some of those moments. There's a lot of pages dedicated to characters that I personally otherwise don't need to be in the book.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Psycho Pirate's big in Infinite Crisis as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's where
I
my
think so.
love for him comes from.
Mm.
Here, I think he's just used for his power set, and it's just amplified by the Anti-Monitor. Not really
Well,
much of a
yeah,
character.
I think he also plays sort of the chorus to the anti-monitor. He's someone to give, to show the severity of the anti-monitor and also to explain to the audience what's going on from that perspective.
Sure.
But I think he also functions toward the end of the book as the, you know, the insane person, locked up in Arkham Asylum who is just going through delusions and, well, he's a criminal, so, we'll lock him up and forget about him. Who's going to believe him?
Yeah, and that was fine. Psycho Pirate feels kind of like whatever in this book. I was
Mhm.
certainly expecting, having seen him in every other crisis, that he would, do something of meaning here, and that doesn't really happen. Although I thoroughly enjoyed watching Barry Allen beat his ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That was really cool.
Satisfying.
He does like it's not like he doesn't get good moments. I like the way he uses his powers and how that impacts the other characters and what he puts Barry through. Like those are cool moments that the Psycho Pirate does get. I just feel like because the book is 12 issues instead of 8 or 6, there are so many times that we have to see him not do anything cool that it hampers when we do see. And I could sort of say that about everybody
Yeah.
because everybody is overexposed since the book is just so long and Marv feels like everyone has to be there all the time. But then there are characters who disappear and you have no idea what they're doing. Like I sort of got whiplash from how often we would go from scene to scene and, character ensemble to character ensemble.
One character I forgot about, or thought didn't remember how late they show up is Superboy Prime.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
With as much importance as Superboy Prime has in Infinite Crisis, like, I was thinking like, oh, I know he wasn't there like the beginning of original Crisis, but surely he's there from like issue 5. My man barely shows up in issue 11.
I was shocked by that too. I was like, wait, I had to go back. Like, was he here before? Like, did I miss him?
Nah, he just pulls up. He pulls up late in the game.
He arrives precisely when he means to.
Late.
Everything we're saying being true, this is cool as shit. Just this.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
The debut
So
of the
good,
Monitor.
So
the
good.
Anti-Monitor, rather. Sick.
Good page turn.
And there are a lot of phenomenal visuals all throughout this. I mean, George Perez is a superstar, like few that have come before or after.
Yeah.
What a feat to have the challenge of, drawing essentially every DC character and nailing their likeness down, nailing it down to the stance that they have in any scene that they're in. He's not just drawing like everyone standing there. He's drawing everybody in their natural pose, the way you would expect to see them, and that was really impressive. Page 7 and 8 of issue 5 are why this book exists. It's the pages of every character having been summoned, I think, by by the Monitor and learning what is going on for the first time.
Yeah.
That is the dream of Marv Wolfman realized on the page, brought to life by George Perez.
The one that jumps out to me, I don't remember when it was, but like George Perez is the king of the group shot. And it's the one, it's the two pager. That's it, Sean. Yep.
This is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, because like Elongated Man is there, Elongated Shining Knight is flying on horseback. Like that works. I think like Jade and Obsidian are always together, which I loved. And I think Swamp Thing's in that one too, right? Am I right in thinking
he's
that?
in the back.
Pretty much
he's
everybody
over in the
is,
corner.
yeah.
It's like the Super Smash Brothers reveal trailer. Everyone's here.
Waldo's even in here.
Yeah, seriously, right?
I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know Perez would do that. Yeah.
Just you can't see him.
Right.
Just see him right there.
But, think about the skill that's required to pull something like that off. And for his part, Perez has talked about how, this was seen as exciting for him. This was something that he took on as not even a challenge, but a joy and something to be experienced, because he thought, hey, these were the three things he thought. A, I can stick it to Marvel because they intervened in the JLA Avengers crossover that I was working on. And I'm going to get back at them for that. B, it's an opportunity to say goodbye to all these characters. Who knows when they're going to show up again? Like, who knew when that old Superman was going to show up again, right?
Yep.
And C, they're not confident this is going to sell. All right, let's get it. Those are the things that he said. Let's show that we can make this work.
George Perez said, "I'll make it sell."
And honestly, as a whole, the draw for this book is the George Perez art for me. Like at this point,
Yeah.
like the story is it's a lot and it's a bit of a slog, but boy, could I pick up this book out of my shelf and just look through it. I don't even need to read it. And it's one of those things where like it's wordy, but the art isn't really hampered by it. They use a lot of those things where it's like the text is right off the panel, so it's not blocking the panel, or sometimes the middle of the page when it's being real expository. That I thought was like, okay, this is really good. Perez is really good at the close-up panels too, when somebody's talking, to really like close in on their face. And I think there's a couple pages where it's right in the middle of the page as well while they're talking. This is just a masterclass of comic book storytelling from an art perspective. And it's not breaking the mold. There are some pages where it does, but it's just like almost perfect, just traditional big two American comics and from an art perspective.
I think he does so much with from a panel perspective, from a page layout perspective. One of the things that caught my eye for sure was his use of wide angle panels and using those and like laddering those down. Because you get a lot of you can get a lot of like cinematography looking through there, and you can have text that is a bit heavier because you're showing full body characters as opposed to close-ups. And so it kind of reminded me of the opposite of the JR art in um, the Central Park fight, where everything was so up close and we were getting a bunch of text. Like, you pull away from these characters to give them a bit of drama, but also to be able to fit in the text that you need. And so there's a lot of consideration when it comes to how the page gets constructed to make room for the art and represent what you need to in that moment in a dramatic way, and allow for the text to live pretty much in unison.
I actually found myself pretty frustrated by the lettering in this, or at least the placement of the balloons. I thought a lot of times it was difficult to read or to figure out how to read a page because they would place letterboxes in what I thought were weird places, that didn't just allow my eyes to naturally flow from panel to panel and word balloon to word balloon or text box to text box. That really hampered my reading of this. That it just didn't flow intuitively for me. Cale, do you have thoughts?
No, I completely agree with you, especially later on. I think it's issue 10 when we have Lila doing the monitor files or whatever at the bottom of the page. And then in issue 12 when we get her sort of big wrap up, there were a lot of points where there are like 20 panels on the page and you're trying to follow each balloon, but at the same time you're doing her wrap up, which can almost be like a voiceover over these moments, but then other times it doesn't quite play that way, and it does happen often.
That issue was difficult to get through. The monitor files, that was taxing because I didn't understand what he was trying to do. Like, because you said it, Kale, that like they didn't always connect or like even thematically, and so sometimes it just felt like a reel. So I at one point reading that, I tried, okay, I'm just gonna read the reel as if it is a reel, and it has motion, so I'm gonna flip through the pages quickly and try to get through those moments. It didn't work because it was so small of a panel and so much was going on. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to. It's comics, right? You're juxtaposed pictorials, right? Let me try to do that. Wasn't working. Then I tried just the story moments, which worked a little bit better because it's bigger on the page. It takes more real estate, but cool concept, but definitely not executed in a way that I thought was helpful at all.
Dude, look at this page. Look at this page. Look at how much they had to put like off to the side. It barely fits on the entire page. That extra bit of dialogue along the side. That's insane.
There are 6 separate moments in those bigger blocks.
Yeah.
And then Luthor and Brainiac have a whole ass conversation on the right hand side. And how are you supposed to read that?
As I'm reading that, I'm like, well, at least it's not covering the art.
Yeah, I mean that aside though, just from an art standpoint, I really love what Perez did here. And there are so many panels. Like I'm just flipping through it and I get to this, this anti-monitor shot. And he's just so massive. Like
Yeah.
look at that cool ass costume. Just just brilliant. Dark
It's
side, go ahead.
it's wild to go from the like the page you just the other page you just held up where things are so small and so cramped, and like we said, we had the conversation at the side and you have to jump between moment to moment to moment, and I feel like a lot of this book is that, very specifically because things are happening fast and you've got to be on top of it, and if you don't, you're wiped away the same way the characters are. But then you'll get slammed in the face with these massive splash pages that are the coolest thing you've ever seen. And you have to take a step back and you have to go, whoa.
Yeah. Uncanny Suit with the 4.99 super chat. Thank you, Uncanny. George Perez's art is unreal great. With the Marvel DC omnibus coming out in the next couple of months, are there any crossovers you want to revisit/read? We can answer that real quick.
For me, it's the one I always want to read. It's 52. I just want to get to 52 and all that kind of crossover of the post Infinite Crisis world of DC Comics.
Go ahead, Cale.
I was trying to think of crossovers. I don't think I necessarily want crossovers as much as I want to do the new Teen Titans. That's a big gap that I've always wanted to cover.
You know what? I'd like to go back. We were talking about events for the main show. I'd actually like to go back to try out Forever Evil. I'd wanna go back and see how that was.
I've really been itching to read Infinite Crisis again, and especially after this, that's like really high on my list. I really, really want to read that again. So I probably will get around to it.
I wonder if reading this will make you appreciate Infinite Crisis even more.
I have a hard time believing that it wouldn't. Just because I never had the context for all of the whys that, of the characters in that, like getting to see the birth of Alexander Luthor and seeing the old Superman here and seeing how he is a hero. I really loved his story and his arc. He's sort of like, hey, I guess I'm not meant to be. My universe is gone. I don't stop being a hero. And he puts everything he has into stopping the anti-monitor, even though his people are no longer here for him to fight for. I just thought like that. I thought that was a really good point to make about Superman. He'll fight even if his Earth isn't standing anymore.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, but before we get too far from the art, I wanted to talk about the use of bolded panels, which I've not seen before in the past or not used to the same kind of effect. If you guys could go to issue 9 and specifically page 16, there's a couple instances, and I'm starting on page 11 where some of the moments are the bolds help to pop the image out almost like 3D. And so for anybody who wants to go along, it's on pages 11, 15 that I'm going to use examples for, and then 16. But um, starting on 11, you get this moment in the center. It looks almost like a belt, and it culminates with Pariah disappearing in the center, and you're having these reaction moments in the end. And then if you go towards 14, or rather 15, there's these cool cutaways, and they're equivalent panels where Cyborg has an eye on one side. The next panel that's bolded here is a billboard with a ship flying over it. Then it's a building, and then juxtaposed to that is like a mirror where it's another building, another billboard with a spaceship on it, and then you see the two Earths combining, but the angle at which it's done looks like a glowing eye, which mirrors Cyborg's eye. And then on 16, let me know if you guys have this effect. But when you look at the bolded panel, it looks like a center cross with the feet going alongside on page 16. If you look at the top through your periphery, tell me if that panel that crosses over looks more yellow to you. And then look at the panel at the bottom, and as you stare at that, in your periphery, does the panel on top look more red? And as you flip through that, looking up and looking down, does that color like switch for you guys? This might just be
I
me.
had a hard time even following that. I'm
So
not sure.
On page 16, like, you're looking at that top panel where it's like, ready, son, I am Jay. I think Barry's going to be okay, all that stuff. Just stare at that panel and notice the cross section. For me, it comes off more yellow. And then when I look at the bottom panel all the way at the end, in the center, and I, again, through my periphery, look at that cross-section panel, it looks like it highlights more red. And there are instances where this happens in the bolded panels for me, looking through. So for me, the art and the way that he uses some of these things are just really interesting, and something that I've not seen before, and I haven't appreciated in older comics, if this is the stuff that he tends to do.
I think your
I
eyes
caught
might
you
be
were
broken.
saying I caught you were saying about the bolded panel, especially with the Brainiac ship in the background, because it does add almost like a parallax effect where like I can see those panels sitting above
Yeah,
other
yeah,
panels in a way.
yeah.
That I get. The yellow, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
No, he just has a way to do stuff with angles and things like that that I thought were really good, and the panel construction itself.
Your ability to look at panels to the periphery is better than mine. That's not how I'm reading. I'm sorry.
Amin with the $5 super chat. Love the anti-monitor design. The last issue being titled Final Crisis is eye-opening. Thanks, Amin. Yeah, dude. I caught that. There were a few
Yep.
illusions that
Yep.
were pretty cool to see. There was the mention of rebirth as well at some point.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think it was issue 11 also
Yeah,
has
it's late.
issue 11 also has a crazy title. Oh, no, let's see if I can find it.
I mean, a lot of these things are scavenged for future, books. Like
Totally.
Dark Crisis took one of those machines that the Monitor made,
Yeah.
and Pariah's machine. So this is like, this is again, when I say this is a textbook, I feel like it is a textbook for everything in the future to kind of, pick and choose what you want to take out of this and use in your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because it's foundation. Like, it's the same as like we were saying, everything, every bit of literature now has mined Shakespeare for absolutely anything that could possibly come out of it. DC's the same with Crisis.
It's interesting though that a book that was meant to be the end of, a certain segment of DC storytelling could also be the foundation for how to tell big stories in the future. Like it didn't have that goal. That wasn't a part of what it was trying to be. And yet it ended up being that.
It's a standard bearer now.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't talked too much about any specific characters, and I think that is part of the weakness of this book, just how little there is to say about what characters do here. I mean, I think you could argue like Superman is kind of the main character, but I think I don't even know if I buy that. I feel like
Yeah.
largely there isn't a main character. Were there characters though that you guys really wanted to talk about? We can start with the Flash because
Oh,
we talked a little bit about Supergirl. We talk
Yeah.
about the Flash, both Flashes, I guess, because I think with both Flashes, um, Marv is doing something interesting, and it's worth saying that he did not want to kill Barry. Marv was a fan of Barry. He argued against killing Barry, but this is what the higher ups at DC wanted him to do. They wanted him to kill Barry, and so that's what he did. Um, but I think it's an interesting thing that he's doing with Barry and Wally because just like with Wildcat, he's using these characters to show you the passing of the moniker.
Yeah.
You know, Barry dies and Wally is so inspired. I mean, he's Kid Flash. He's been inspired by Barry, but he's so inspired by his legacy and his sacrifice and what he means that he decides, you know what? No more Kid Flash. I'm going to don the costume and I'm going to become the Flash, the one and only. And reading that and then thinking about how many people I know for whom Wally is their Flash, I can certainly see why.
hmm. And I think even the first instance where after Barry passes, he it, that piece where the Psy run hits and starts on is this doubt. I felt that immediately. There's this like sense of as much as he wants or thinks he can live up to who the Flash was, there's this thing that maybe not holds him back, but it makes him wary of his own capabilities, which I thought was interesting. And I can see where some of that gets pulled from for some of the future stories. And again, limited number of stories read for the Flash outside of the side things, but it was interesting seeing how much of that character has continued to persist post this book. So that was a really cool moment. Seeing him grow and seeing him take up that mantle was badass.
And if you're Barry and you're gonna go out, you might as well go out in one of the most iconic pages in comics, like the paneling as he slowly just evaporates. It's so good. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Barry and Superman from Earth 2 were my favorite characters.
That's Superman with the gray, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like he was a definitely a key person that we were following, and especially after the Earth's merge, and he's suffering because his Lois is gone. His world has evaporated, and now he has to live with being that sole survivor, like the sole survivor of Earth 2. Outside of some of the other heroes there, but like um, that was interesting to have to experience.
And that would have been the Superman of the JSA, right, Cale? That would have been pre
Like
that
technically,
Flash story.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have been. I guess I'm not totally sure of his standing with the JSA previous to this, but they would have been the same Earth. Yeah.
Also want to thank Sean Olson for the 9.99 super chat. He says scrimp scrampy.
That's my brother telling me what my dinner order is. So there's a peek behind the kimono there. But thanks for the super chat.
Appreciate it. Um yeah, Barry spends a lot of time in this book essentially kidnapped by the Anti-Monitor and being emotionally manipulated by Psycho Pirate. So like I said, when he gets his lick back on Psycho Pirate and is zipping around and there's the scene where he goes to Batman and tells him like, or I think he goes to Batman and tells him like, oh man, things are bad. Of course that immediately made me think about Justice League or Batman. BVS is when that happens, the movie
Mm.
where Flash goes back and Bruce sees him or whatever. um for all that, to then his death, I thought Barry had a great arc throughout this. And it's sort of wild to me that DC let him be dead for so long after this. Like, that's a genuine surprise to me because it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with him. They just wanted Wally, I guess.
I think they also wanted to show evolution for their heroes too. And so like what better way to show this is a new era than somebody who's traditionally a Teen Titan actually being able to level up. So I see the point in it. Sticking it is a different question, but I understand the point of it.
Well, and I think the sales back that up too. I think Wally as Flash, I think that really took off. I think the first arc or two by the guy who uh did the first Wally Flash stuff was like, it wasn't quite as popular, but then Wade and Morrison and I think even Miller got their hands on it, and Wally as the Flash just exploded in popularity. And then you got into crazy concepts like the Speed Force and the entire Flash family, going generations forward and backward. So I think people were just into Wally, and I think it sort of became clearer that Barry functioned better as a mentor that had passed.
Hey, if you guys are enjoying the conversation, make sure you like the video. That really helps us out a lot. If you're listening to us and you're not subscribed, there's a really easy way to change that. Just click that subscribe button. That also helps us out tremendously. We just hit 2,900 subs today. So we are very close to 3,000, and we would love it if you would help us get across that barrier. We're going to get into all of your comments here in just a few minutes. We have a little bit more Crisis we want to talk before we hear from you guys. Then also, of course, as we always do, an announcement of what the next book club theme will be for August. Go ahead.
Quickly, Mike Barron was the guy who did that Wally run of the Flash right after Crisis.
Okay.
Thank you, chat.
We haven't talked about Dr. Light at all. And she seemed to be of particular focus. And I didn't fully understand that because the Dr. Light that I'm aware of is some dude. And so I wasn't sure what this was about. It was funny how she was handled because she speaks Japanese, but then they just hand wave that someone made it so that she can just understand everybody and everybody can understand her. That was a little weird, but I did actually really enjoy her arc going from being kind of a douche who doesn't care about anybody or any of this to a person who's invested in this fight and finds a way to meaningfully contribute not just her powers but her heart and her will to fight.
You kind of think when she first gets her powers that were it not for the Crisis and her powers coming straight from the Monitor, she would have easily become a villain.
Yeah. Yep. That's why I thought that was. That's why I thought that was going for like a hot second. Wait. Oh, okay. Okay, we're back.
Especially with a Dr. Light moniker as more modern fans. Not the best name to have attached.
How about Wildcat? My favorite character.
Yeah, how about Wildcat, Sean?
I got a quote for you, Cale. I have a quote for all you people who have made fun of me about my dislike of Wildcat for all these years and defended him as such a cool cat. Here's a quote. This is directly from the book, so I don't want to hear any contradiction of this. This is facts. This is said by Wildcat to Power Girl. Helping Power Girl? Don't think so. This is merely a drop in the ocean. What real good can an overaged prize fighter do in this crazy world?
Mm.
Newsflash, said it right here in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Wildcat sucks.
Counterpoint. He does save that girl.
Oh,
So
touche.
it may be a drop in the ocean, but he's doing it. What is the ocean but many drops?
Dang.
Counterpoint. Wildcat rules.
Counterpoint, you're wrong.
The I forgot her name, taking over the mantle. Man.
Yolanda.
And then the little Spanish things in between, the little moments. It was an aged way of writing in this character's Hispanic, but it falls flat for me. And so reading that immediately felt cheese, like super fucking corny.
Marco
And
said DEI replacement.
uh, and she doesn't contribute. Like there's this thing about she needs to carry this legacy on, and she's so inspired, and she hops in here and there, but of no consequence.
I get the impression both from the book and from some of the chat, Hound in the chat, that she had a lot more to do outside this book.
I sure, yeah, like in the tie-ins and
So.
stuff, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She quite literally hops up and just shows up in places.
Yeah.
But I think that her character is also one of those characters that's kind of emblematic of the idea of legacy throughout this. That we're getting rid of everything we know. It's the same with Wally. It's the same with Dr. Light. Does she really get to shine? No, but apparently she does in stuff I haven't read. So again, there's one of those characters where maybe didn't really work in this 12 issues, but I understand the reason for it.
Superboy flying in. Look, a skinny Superman. That was funny. That cracked me up.
Drunk in the wash.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh shit, that's funny.
I think for me, this is a book. The way I'm gonna remember this as we wind down is that I don't necessarily love the sum of its parts, but I really, really love some of the parts.
Yeah.
There are some things here that are really cool that feel epic and big scale event storytelling. Like when they're fighting the Anti-Monitor and they think they beat him and he just keeps coming back, I was like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. I really felt bad for Superman. He's like, oh my God, you got to do this shit again. All right, I'm just going to make sure you die. I'm not leaving here until you are dead. I loved that. And I think even today, you don't get storytelling from some of these events that carries that same level of weight. You know how bad this guy is. You know what it means for him to be alive. You see how hard he is to kill. And they break his body down and he's still coming. I was like, oh my God, he's just fire now.
It's that video game boss shit. Like
Yeah.
Hitting phase, yeah.
That was epic and cool, and I think it looked great, and it hit all the right buttons for me. I just wish that the book didn't waste what I felt was waste so much time on moments and characters that didn't feel like they added to the overall narrative. But again, I'm saying that in 2024. I understand that for people at this time, you're seeing everybody you love. This is the 50th year. This is a cap off. You've never seen anything like this before. I get that, but I don't think that the weight of that helped me get through this.
Yeah, like when you're early on in the book, Harbinger's amassing these people to kind of that the Monitor wants to kind of fight the Anti-Monitor, and she goes to Solivar. Like, all right, that doesn't mean much to me. Like, I know who he is, but maybe it meant something to people back then. But like, I'm kind of in that same boat. I still recommend this book though, because I think reading this will enhance so much of your DC Comics reading after the fact or rereads after the fact that I still think it's kind of required reading for comics.
Wait, in this the year of our Lord 2024, I don't know. I just don't know. Post New 52, I sort of think we're mm, I
Same.
think if you want to look at an older era of DC, I think that is true. But I think even the stuff that comes after this for some audiences is even what this is to us, to me. You know what I mean? Like the pre-Infinite Crisis stuff would be like what Crisis on Infinite Earths was to me, like unearthing this tome of this ancient treasure. I think so much has come after it. And while it's inspired a ton, I think like even the addition of Dr. Manhattan in Rebirth and Doomsday Clock and the way that has reshaped the universe, I'm not sure it matters that much
And using that,
currently.
I mean, and using that as an example, Watchmen specific, that has more of a rereadability and application for comics literature than this does. This feels more isolated to the history of something that has passed. That if you're interested in, it's there for you to explore, but it's not requisite. Like if I had to choose between this or Watchmen, Watchmen goes on the syllabus, not this necessarily.
I mean, that sort of feels like an unfair comparison, but um,
Similar years, like that's where I'm kind of coming at it from a time frame and from the legacy that it has in terms of rereadability.
To be fair, you could do a syllabus that's all 1985 comics.
Sure.
I I hate to say this, especially because of the audience, but I don't think I would recommend this because I think that the world of DC has moved so far beyond this. Yes, we just had Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's a direct callback to this. But now that I've read this, I don't even feel like it really enhanced that book. Like, all right, yeah, there are certain things like this is where Pariah's from and blah blah blah, but who cares? Like it didn't it doesn't really matter to today's books that this book exists. But I don't think that that means that a person shouldn't read it. I think it's one of those things you should read if you are a comic book historian. It's been a gap for me for 20 years, and I'm glad and grateful that I have read it. But I wouldn't tell someone who's like, hey, I want to get into DC Comics. What should I read? I wouldn't say this. I would say a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And I think this exists in a very interesting and specific place because it is important to the history of comics in a way that few event books are. There are a lot of event books. Very few of them still matter or, whatever. This one matters historically, and it's so important. But because of that importance and because of what it set out to do, it alienates itself from everything that comes after it.
Mm.
And when you consider that, plus the fact that it's really tough to read and get through because of the writing side and all the characters, I cannot recommend it. I enjoyed it for the most part. Well, I enjoyed parts of it, like I said earlier, but I simply can't recommend it. I apologize to all the DC heads.
Yeah, for me, it's like a recommendation with an addendum. It's like, here's why I'm recommending it to you. Um, on its whole, it's tricky.
It's just lore. It just feels like lore, and um, those don't reflect the current stories being told in the way that comics are being told nowadays. So it's definitely an add-on to, like, it is an enhancement of my comics reading experience solely for the fact that It similarly is a gap, but I don't know that I will have to return to this ever.
Did you guys happen to read the history of the DC universe? That, well, was at least included in my version of this. I don't know if you guys know.
Didn't get it, and I
No.
wouldn't have had time.
Okay. I read it. You know, it essentially what it is, and it's collected here in this edition, and I would imagine probably most editions of Crisis on Infinite Earths that are released nowadays, because it is quite literally a history of the DC universe by Marv Wolfman and George Perez that streamlines everything. It tells you the history in a linear fashion, and it's supposed to be a springboard for you to read what comes after Crisis. And so, I guess it's effective in that, but it was harder to read than the event itself.
Hmm.
Cale, have you ever read it before?
Can you show it to me? Maybe I have.
Yeah, like here's just a couple pages.
I think I have. I think I have.
It's a it's prosy. It reminds me a
Yeah.
lot of Morrison's The Clown at Midnight. Very different goals, very different things, but it's mostly words, and then you get like a couple of pictures or panels per page. It's a slog. And I could see a a young person, I could see like a teenager who really loves DC and really wants to know what's going on. I could imagine myself having loved this at the time, but given that this is completely like inconsequential from a like this is invalidated now type thing, there's no reason to read this. It only exists to explain to you the lore, and the lore is invalidated.
Mm.
So,
It looks cool though.
yeah, it did. It did. Um, yeah, those are our thoughts on Crisis on Infinite Earths.
We did it.
We did it. I'm glad we did it. It was a doozy, but we got there. And I can now forever say that I have read this event. So I'm grateful for that.
Hell yeah. Were there any specific characters you personally popped off really hard for? Like for me, seeing the Spectre and Sergeant Rock and Easy Company. Love that shit.
The moment with the sorcerers, for me, all those characters are like, that's like digging out of like the bottom of the barrel, uh, for DC characters. So when the Green Lantern and Doctor Occult,
Mm.
Doctor Occult is who I popped off for. I love Doctor Occult, and I know nothing about him. I think he fucking rules. I don't know anything about him.
Dude, Dr. Occult just showed up in a new DC Comics book that I just read. I don't remember what it
Did
was.
he? Oh man.
Yeah, yeah. He's also in the Mystic U. Good character in that. For me, Metal Men. Whenever I see the Metal Men in the background,
Yeah.
like is it Mercury? He's the red one that like can like
Yeah.
is a little more
Yeah, I
liquid.
think so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love Metal Men.
Yeah, the Metal Men rule.
Tin and
I didn't pop for anybody.
gold. Really?
No. Yeah.
They're all before Sean's time.
Pretty much. Like I liked seeing old Superman. That was cool.
Not even a Wildcat for the bit.
No.
Sean doesn't do bits.
I started the show with a fucking bit. How dare you?
Sean doesn't do bits.
Amin said we need a new history of the DC universe. And that is exactly what I was thinking when I got to the end of this.
Mm.
That we need a new history of the DC universe, something to kind of define the universe going forward. I'm so glad this won at the time that it did, because we are on the precipice of a massive seismic shift at DC. It's not crisis level. There's no crisis, but we are having a new universe being. So it feels pretty good to have read something so consequential as we get into this new phase of DC Comics.
Wasn't John Ridley writing a new history of the DC universe?
There's
Wasn't that a
another
comic
history
coming
of
out?
the DCU book.
The other history. That's what it was. Okay.
It's like the Black history of DC. Yeah,
Yeah.
now's the time. Go ahead.
I I was gonna point out on the characters Ray Mescalado pointed out. I noticed ambush bug showed up in COIE poster for 2 panels, and that was it. I caught that too for the first time.
Really? Damn, that'd been cool to catch. Didn't see that one.
Please, if you guys have comments or questions, now is the time when we want to hear from you most. The chat's been popping off. We've had a lot of conversation going on, and now is absolutely the time where we want to get into your thoughts on this.
While we're on characters that I love, uh, Amin points out Atomic is going to hate me for this, but the Legion was shoehorned into this event, and I I'm very with that. I love the Legion of Superheroes. Um, I very much would. What I kept thinking every time the Legion came up was like, wouldn't the Legion have like technology to sort of, if not deal with this, be able to like see it coming, or we've made so many advances even since 1985, 40 years later. The Legion are 200 years later or some shit. Like, wouldn't there be more?
So you're thinking they should have like an anti-monitor monitor to monitor the anti-monitor.
Yeah. We get
Okay,
it.
I see.
MP says Joshua Williamson is a continuity junkie. He should get cracking on an all new or on a new history of the DCU slash Who's Who guide for All In. I think that's a great idea.
I don't hate that. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, and I think
Get
DC should publish it for free.
get
They should give one to everybody who makes a purchase the day that All In #1 comes out.
sure. Oh yeah. Get I feel like Jeremy Adams is probably right there too. Get that vibe from him.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there are a few writers you could tap for that kind of thing.
Me.
There you go. Izzy says this shows why I love this show. Discussing your opinions on it without being subsumed by expectations and fostering a good space for more conversation. That's really the point of these book clubs. I don't even look at it as a review necessarily. It's more just a conversation about a book, and everybody's thoughts and opinions on it are certainly welcome. And I love, for me, the angle was, well, what's my take on this as somebody who's reading it after the fact? A book that feels so centralized around the time it was created in that it almost doesn't even work outside of that time frame. How does it function to read it now? I'm fascinated by that kind of thing. And I think like for example, Marco had brought up Watchmen. The reason why I don't think it's a great counterpoint is because Watchmen is timeless. And Crisis on Infinite Earths wasn't built to be timeless. Not that Watchmen was built to be timeless, but Crisis is a slave to its time frame, whereas Watchmen is not. And I don't even think something like, for example, Civil War is. Like it's built upon the history of the comics at that time, but you could pick up that book whenever and you don't need to know what was happening for the couple of years prior, and it just works. Whether you like it or not is a different matter, but like it works as a story.
That reminds me. I thought about Civil War, and is it Frontlines that does
Yeah.
the ground view? Uh, I felt sort of back to the conversation on the various character points of view, and seeing so many, and seeing all the angles of the different worlds and everything. I felt like good events are able to do that and do that well. And I feel like while this sort of uh, goes overboard, it does give us a massive look at what's happening, and it makes us feel it across the different worlds, even if the worlds are pretty similar, in a similar way to the way Frontlines operates, and we can see the ground level, how this is affecting people. I really connected with that this time.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I almost wish that I had read this at some other point. I would like for this to have I almost wish that this had been a reread for me,
Mm.
but I am also grateful to get to talk about it as a first reader.
Mm.
It's, maybe we'll talk about it again at another point. Um MP says, "What do the pals think of the decision to have Barry's sacrifice be remembered but not Kara's?" I think it's probably due to just wanting to start flat for Superman and making it so that he was always the last son of of Krypton. That's my supposition, and I think that Barry's sacrifice being remembered and him being remembered as a hero gives Wally legacy to stand on that he needs because he has to be inspired by the
Mm.
Flash's legacy, whereas Superman doesn't need to be inspired by anybody's legacy, at least not Supergirl. So I think that's the reason. As to how I feel about that decision, it's hard for me to answer that because it didn't affect me, and I do know that a version of Supergirl does come back during Man of Steel. I just don't know which version that is. So I'm not even sure how long this lasted or mattered, but I don't know the details.
Yeah, for me, it's like I remember the cover, like that cover of Superman holding Supergirl. It's one of the most iconic comic covers of all time. So like that's where my lasting memory comes from because it didn't stick. She comes back. It's quick. So it's much like Barry stuck for a bit. So that's why I think it matters more in a way.
Look, a few people have pointed out the couple of times we've talked about this that Kara Zor-El, Supergirl, comes back in the 2000s. But there was another one in between that I is that Linda Danvers? Chad, y'all have to help me out here. Um, she has like she has like fire wings and she dates Lex Luthor and it's a whole fucking thing. Oh, Hound's gonna put some notes on Supergirl in the Discord, so
There it is.
there you go.
One reason to join the Discord if you haven't joined the Discord.
There you go.
Amin says, "Why would you say, based on this, ignoring Infinite Crisis, some of the heroes survived and ended up in that paradise dimension instead of just being killed?" My honest feeling is that I think, without knowing what happened behind the scenes, I think people would probably have been really, really mad on a different level to watch Superman die.
Mm. And it would have had to have been a bigger deal,
Yeah.
like killing, presumably the original Superman. Like, that would have had to have been absolutely insane for this event when this event isn't what that was about.
Chat's saying that there were two Cale, Matrix and Linda Danvers.
The Matrix was the one with the flame wings, and then Linda Danvers, I think, was the one with the white crop top.
Mm.
Amin says, "Sean, did your copy also include Perpetua at the beginning, creating the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor, or is my copy defective?" Amin, I think you just have night terrors that are subsisting because of Perpetua and everything that happened during that era of DC Comics, and you just see these things everywhere you look.
What was the third brother's name in Snyder's run? There was Anti-Monitor, Monitor, and the guy with the axe that he was like retconned to be like a third brother of the Monitors.
I think I know what you're talking
The Forger? The Forger, maybe? Something like that.
Yeah, Alpheus, the World Forger.
How do you go from Monitor and Anti-Monitor to Alpheus?
Redheaded stepchild, I guess. I don't know.
No idea.
So okay, Monitor, so Watcher, not Watcher, and Forger, Maker. Watcher, not Watcher, and Maker. Why?
This is why we need Scott Snyder on the show. Chat, if you want to petition it, get the word out there. We got questions, mostly about Absolute Comics, but I think we could throw in some Monitor, Anti-Monitor questions for him.
I like Dan's suggestion. Carl. Should have just been Carl.
It's the dirty Carl of the group. Yeah.
Super innocuous.
MP said 0 hour next. Is it good? I don't even know. I don't
Dude,
know
I
anything
know
about it.
nothing about Zero Hour.
I think that's
Uh,
where they destroy Coast City, right? Is that
no,
oh.
nope. That's Reign of Superman.
So what they destroy some city though, right?
It was the Parallax stuff, right?
Right.
It's the parallax stuff for sure.
Oh,
Uh, I know that. I actually 0 hour is actually my gap too.
Oh,
I
okay.
know, but I know. Yeah, it is the parallax stuff. Green Arrow dies just after it. Hound says no 0 hour. Wow.
If Hal says no to a DC book, must be rough.
Word.
Forget it.
yes to Invasion though.
Yeah.
We out.
Right, yeah, yeah. Just to troll us. Thanks a lot, Hound.
Hard yes to Invasion.
Yes, but you need to read Emerald Twilight and Armageddon 2001 before it. That's what Emil
Oh.
says.
The Emerald series, Emerald Dawn, Emerald Twilight, and there's another one. There are 3 Emerald books that are like the saga of Hal Jordan up to Kyle Rayner. It's great. They're a great summation of Hal's time as the Green Lantern. Definitely recommend that.
Sarcastic Enchilada says the Anti-Monitor's name is also Mobius in the New 52. That's funny. Is that a Jeff Johns thing? And why does he need a name? Why can't he just be Anti-Monitor? Like that's so cool. Like I don't want to read. Like I know Galactus has some name and stuff. Like he has some whole backstory. I don't want to know all that. He's a giant purple dude that eats planets. I'm good.
It's what
His
it's
name's
one of those
Galen, okay?
That's all right. That's funny. I have an uncle and a cousin both named Galen. My. Never mind.
All right.
I got lost.
His train of thought just fizzled out like Barry Allen.
Lost in the sauce.
Disappear.
Don't worry, it'll come back in 20 years, just like Barry Allen.
I don't know how long it'll take us to get around to it, just because of having to cycle through different month themes or whatever for the book club. But I would like one day for us to have done a book club on all of the Crisis books,
Yeah. Yeah.
because technically this is our first one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Book club. I mean, if you're counting, you
Yeah.
know, the weekly reviews
We have
Just-
done
for Dark Crisis.
Dark Crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, but like book clubs,
Yeah, for sure.
that seems crazy to me. With you being on this show, Cale.
I mean, at least we're starting from square one.
Yeah.
that is
I would
true.
I would say it's never fit, and that's why I've never pulled. Or I feel like I've said this crisis once or twice,
Probably, yeah.
but it's just didn't it's never fit. It's never been the right time. Can you imagine having this discussion with those guys?
Yes.
Yeah, I could. I listened.
Didn't you understand why?
Uncanny Suit says, I'm taking no responsibility for invasion. That's all y'all. You want to point blame at anyone for invasion? You look to Dan Trudeau and you look to Atomic Count. Those are the ones who beat the drum for invasion. And really, you look to Marco, because Marco is the fool that decided to start that all off. So that's the triumvirate of evil, as far as I'm concerned, when it relates to invasion.
Hell yeah. Dan the Truth Trudeau, Atomic Hound, and Marco the Calculator, the triumvirate.
You're like the world breaker of that trio. World forger.
And the Carl.
Yeah. Atomic Count says we need to eat mushrooms for Final Crisis. Hey,
Okay.
MP says Morrison's Final Crisis really is not part of the Crisis tradition. It's more a sequel to Kirby's Fourth World. That's interesting that you say that because in all the research that I was doing for this, I saw Crisis described as a three-part epic, beginning with Crisis on Infinite Earths, the middle point being Infinite,
Yeah.
and then the final one being Final Crisis.
Yeah.
Having now read all three of those, and not understanding really the last one, I can see why they say that, but I also understand what you're saying.
I would definitely want to dig into Final Crisis again. Because
Right.
I've read, I read Infinite Crisis when it was coming out. I've read this multiple times. Um, and Final Crisis just never got its hooks into me. I feel that's one I feel like I need to put my like academic hat on for.
It's more
Izzy and I need to do a paper on that.
It's the one with the propeller on top, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that does sound like a truly beautiful project for this community to take on. Can we discover the truth of Final Crisis and figure out a way to read and think about it that makes it phenomenal?
This community, yeah, we absolutely can do that.
I'd argue it's ready. Phenomenal.
It's only 7 issues. Shouldn't be that hard.
Do you understand it? I don't understand it.
I've never read it.
Oh, there you go.
I bet of all the people, I bet Marco will get it immediately. He'll be like, yeah, oh yeah, it's the beating. The Superman goes into the beating heart of the universe and unlocks the music note that is the harmonic frequency of Darkseid's bullshit.
Obviously.
See, you're joking, Cale, but you're kind of still right there.
Oh, I said 2 words there that were not from the book, and that's Darkseid's bullshit.
Oh, wait.
There
what?
is some harmonic frequency. Superman goes into a music machine. Like,
Robotters 100 says you got to do a deep dive, Sean. I mean, one of your Twilight of the Superheroes deep dives. That's an interesting thought. I haven't done a deep dive yet for the show that is based on a comic that actually released. So maybe I'll do that one day. But I like the challenge of putting it to you guys to figure that one out for me. Let me work on some other things. I got things cooking.
MP with a $10 super chat. It makes the most sense to do the Infinite Crisis saga after Crisis on Infinite Earths, starting with 1 Identity Crisis, 2 Countdown to Infinite Crisis, 3 Infinite Crisis proper, 4 52, and 5 1 year later.
MP, dude, you're doing it to me, man. That shit gets me excited. That kind of shit gets me hyped. Like the idea that I could just dig in the crates and go from where I'm at now and then read all those things back to back to back. Like, damn, I just put all my stuff in storage, so I don't really have access to my hardcovers and stuff like that. But I would love to be able to dig into all that stuff.
it's great for that. DCU and
No.
DC Infinite app.
Yeah.
No,
It's all there.
You know why? I got 2 reasons for you. One, subscription, because I still have Comixology.
Comixology.
Gotta go with that
And I
one.
still have my Barnes and Noble. Yes, I gotta get rid of that tonight. That shit's about to renew. I gotta somebody
Making a reminder right now.
Yeah, please.
Sign up to Rocket Money, the newest sponsor of the Comics Pals, Rocket Money, where you can
that's
track all of your subscriptions.
Where you
That'd be
can
good.
get a subscription to track your subscriptions. Wonderful.
It's free. It's free.
Is Rocket Money free?
Yeah.
There's like a basic version. Yeah.
Oh.
But that what MP points out, that trail from Identity Crisis to 1 year later to Final Crisis, I caught on the DC train literally right before Identity Crisis. I was having I was looking at the solicits for the death of Blue Beetle and how that kicked off so much of Identity Crisis and Infinite Crisis and the stuff that surrounded that as I was like getting started. And man, let me tell you, Sean, you think you were excited about Civil War when that stuff happened. Ooh, baby. I was eating good for 15 years.
I believe it.
Did you pick up all of that like while it was coming out?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, I did.
Nice.
I
And
was
you were
reading
eating it?
52. I was eating. Yeah, I was eating. I was eating 52. I was eating Countdown. Oh man, I was having a great time.
Damn, man. I wish I could go back in time, man. Well, I guess I can because I can just read the books, but I wish I could, experience it
The
when
moments.
you did, at that similar age
Yeah,
while it was dropping. One of my bigger regrets, I use quotation marks, air quotes for that I wasn't on DC before 2008 or 9. Izzy's issues with the $2 super chat. Thanks, Izzy. Y'all need to recommend more projects for me and Cale. I told you, Final Crisis. Get it done.
There it
that's
is.
yeah. That's
Is
our.
that
That's our.
is is that what you're working on already?
So we're so currently our list of projects are we're doing uh a paper on the difference between American and Japanese Godzilla.
Oh.
And now we're doing apparently we're going to decipher our final crisis in an academic paper.
Okay.
So,
I like it. Can we turn that paper into a video?
I I bet we could.
Sean, just to go back to what you said, like you wish you were more ingrained in DC at the time to be able to experience some of this as it was coming out. Were you like um specifically a Marvel head? Like, oh, that's just what I do. It's Marvel.
I was a baby, dude. I was scared of DC. I was reading Batman and I was reading Green Lantern and I just felt like everything outside of that was just too crazy and I was on the forums and everything I read was like DC's hard to wrap your head around and so I just was like I'm gonna stick to Marvel. This is who I know, these are who I like and I don't want to venture too deeply. The only time that I did anything other than that with DC was Jeff Johns and Gary Frank Action Comics. And even that, I don't have every issue of. I just picked up a little bit here and there. I think the Brainiac arc was the one that I read.
Mm.
So yeah, I was scared. Atomic Count says, I wish you could go back and read Crisis on Infinite Earths in real time, Sean. It was a different experience and individual issues coming out monthly. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Wow.
It's easy to believe.
The monthly grind of that though, like to remember what happens in certain issues to certain characters. That
Well,
must have been
but
wild.
also think about those cliffhangers they left us with.
Sure.
The universe exploded like 4 times at the end of an issue, and you had to be like, "Well, shit, I guess I'll go to the comic store."
Also, keep in mind, it's not you just didn't have as much to do. So you would read when I was a kid and there were video game consoles and all that, I used to read the issues again. When Civil War
Yeah.
was coming out, I would read every preceding issue before I read the new one. That's how little I had going on. And I'm sure that young people in 85 would do the same if you
Yeah.
didn't throw the copy out.
Or eat it like Kale does.
Well, I've got to get it in there, you know.
Columbo says maybe you should do New Avengers right in the wheelhouse. You know, it's tough, right? Because New Avengers is like years long. So, how do we present a book club to you guys about something that was years long without it taking all of our lives to get through? Like, we just don't really have time to read something that was years long and then do a book club on in 1 month. So, I don't know how to present that kind of thing. But if there was a way, I would absolutely love to do it because New Avengers is my favorite.
That Bendis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a Dark Avengers head, man. I loved Dark Avengers.
That
Just
was
the whole, what was it? The list into Dark Reign, Dark Avengers. That is like my sweet spot for Marvel Comics, which explains why I love just D-list Marvel villains. Like Marvel villains is my thing. Like the art that I have commissioned behind me at my normal spot, all Marvel villains. So that's where that comes from.
Amin says you can do a book club on Time Runs Out. We did all of Secret Wars. Tyler, were you with us for that? No.
I was a listener at the time.
Okay. Yeah. We did all of Secret Wars. I would love to. I mean, I don't know if that's something that we could pull off again, but we did it and it was fun. I loved it.
In Now might be the time to figure it out if you catch my transition drift.
Well, this is where we announce next month's book club theme. And I think it's fitting because we just did DC's biggest event and we did DC month for July. We are going to give Marvel the same treatment because the theme around these parts for August is Marvel events.
Oh shit.
Yes. And so, Marvel fans, Marvel stands, rise up. Now is our time. We gave the DC heads their time. Now is our time to decide what book of all the many possible options there are on the Marvel side of things, what book we want. And I'm including myself in this. Not that I have a say, but I am a Marvel head. So I'm going to be watching very closely the nomination process. And let me tell you something. You can nominate a book right now. Right now. Because the nomination pages are up on the Discord, on youtube.com/thecomicspals under the community tab, and on the Patreon for free. Nominate. All you have to do is tell us what Marvel or DC or what Marvel event or crossover do you most want us to read. The top 4 are going to make the Patreon poll, and then the winner of that will be the subject of next month's book club, which we'll be doing at the end of August.
As somebody who can't nominate us for, are there any things you would like to see show up in this?
That's a tough one. I think I I've been thinking a lot about Secret Invasion,
Hmm.
but I
Great
really
show.
want to.
Great show.
Oh, it was okay. I really want us to do something like meaty and deep. I would love to do Secret Empire.
I literally put Secret Empire on the image because I knew you would enjoy that, Sean.
I love it.
I love Secret
Yeah.
Empire, so I'm with you.
I would do that.
Oh,
I would do that.
I'd want to do House of M. I've never read it. And that
Wow.
would be a cool like to see what happens there with Scarlet Witch and all of that. Just the implications.
We've already got 2 for Secret Invasion, and I just put the stuff up like seconds ago. So stiff competition. Everybody make sure that you guys get your nominations in. We're only going to let it last for about a week. So make that happen. And you'll hear soon what the final 4 are.
Is there anything off limits, Sean?
So
that.
if we're going based on when you joined the show, then no.
Yeah, and I think it's about time for a refresh on the conversations too.
I was even thinking, like, do I have meaningfully different or interesting things to say about Civil War? And I do.
Maybe I'm on Iron Man's side.
Yeah, he was right, dude.
I've said it in the book club we did. I am on Iron Man's side in real life, not in the comic book.
Both commit.
God, that conversation would drive me. That would be my 13th reason, as they say.
Secret Wars 2? Secret Wars 2? What the hell are you trying to do to us?
That's it. Whoa. If you get us all the action figures, then we'll do it.
Amin just voted Secret Wars 2 on the Patreon. What are you doing?
You know what? If you get all 4 of us, you have to get all 4 of us the action figures. We will do Secret
Entire
Wars
set.
2.
Entire
Yep.
set.
We will do Secret Wars 2.
Near mint.
I don't care about that.
Uncanny Suit says, how much money do we need to give you guys for a JLA/Avengers book club? Dude, I don't even know how to get that.
Enough for us to get the books.
I don't even know how to get that. I think it's coming out soon in August, I think. I'm probably not going to be able to get that.
Yeah.
Aaron Ruiz, we're going to wrap up here in a moment. I just love hanging out with you guys. Aaron Ruiz says, okay, to be honest, I would really like Civil War 2. I'd really like to talk about it and how it didn't ruin Carol Danvers. Let's go, Aaron Ruiz. I would love to talk about Civil War 2. Bring it on. David Marquez art.
Yeah, at least it's a good looking book.
That shit was awesome.
I think Inhumans versus X-Men could lead to some good discussion too.
Inhumans
You
versus
could,
X-Men. Who did that?
ooh,
That's Soul.
might have been Soul. Yeah, because he would have been the Inhumans guy. Yeah,
Yeah, because
Mm,
it was supposed to be Fraction.
right.
you're right. Yep. Yeah, it was Soul, and I think was it Cooter on art?
Hmm,
Aaron,
That
oh, man, I
sounds
love
right.
Cooter.
Dan Trudeau says, "Have any of you guys read JLA Avengers?" I've read. I think I did. I had a couple of trades that were Marvel and DC crossovers, but then my friend borrowed them, and then he moved to Florida, so I never got them back. And
Feel
now,
like
of course, those are impossible to find.
I feel like I flipped through it in my early days, but I just like for me, I'm just not interested in it. It's never the twain shall meet for me.
Yeah. Well, wait until about 2034 when Kevin Feige and James Gunn are like, you know what?
Oh,
actually,
I will be interested in this by then.
I don't even think that's going to happen. So, All right, guys, we're going to get out of here. Quick things. Make sure you get your nomination in. If you can hear my voice, that means that there's a place for you to nominate, and you should do that. If you are a Marvel head, if there are Marvel events that you love, share it with us and nominate it so that maybe we can read it and partake. Also, patreon.com/the comics pals. Thank you to the wonderful people that nominated and went on to vote for this book. If you would like to be a part of the voting process, patreon.com/the comics pals is the only way to do that. The next time we are live with you is this Thursday for Pals Pulls. We've got a whole bunch of books to talk about. And then Saturday for the main show, the MCU dropped a huge bomb this week at San Diego Comic-Con. They announced Robert Downey Jr.'s return to the MCU, but not in the role that you think. We're going to get into that on Saturday. And let me tell you, we have thoughts. Many, many thoughts.
opinions.
We haven't even the four of us haven't even talked about it like
No.
together.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave us with this note. My Apple Watch was recording everything I said, and it said, "We have farts. Many
Yeah,
farts."
yeah. Amen.
I didn't know my mic was on for that.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other.
See ya.